Okay, here's the deal. The H800 is a lot like that chick that used to date that was drop dead gorgeous, like absolutely beautiful. Everybody's heads would turn when she walked in the room. But as soon as she started making noise, it was all over. The H800 is a lot like that. Although not nearly that bad, admittedly, there are actually some parts of this headphone that I really like and some parts that I would even determine to be the best that I've personally ever heard, but it also comes with some serious drawbacks and some serious issues that we're gonna talk about. All right guys, if you wanna skip to any part of this review, go ahead and skip to these time codes over here. That being out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into this review. So the HD800 here is, it's one of the most controversial headphones that I think I've had on this channel. Depending on who you talk to, whose review you watch, whose review you read, basically any discussion about this headphone, there's a camp over here who loves these, and there's a camp over here who absolutely despise these. And something that for me was kind of interesting was looking at the Amazon reviews, because if you go by the numbers and by the number of reviews that are on this headphone, and interestingly enough, very positive reviews as well, in the $1,000 and up area of headphones, this is one of the most often used ones. Kind of like your ex-girlfriend. I had to. I know that one was a little too easy, but so was your girlfriend. All right, I'm done. Whew. I crack myself up sometimes. Now, there's a number of reasons why, and a number of things that I attribute this to. And I think one of the more controversial things is that there's not just one or two areas about this headphone that seems to be a topic of discussion. There's the treble, there's the mid-range, there's the bass. Those are all very controversial issues. People have their opinions on what they consider to be forward or what they consider to be detailed, and resolution versus brightness, and dynamics versus brightness, and what's natural bass response and what's not, and what's accurate, what's not. And regarding the soundstage, there's, you know, is wide good, is wide bad? Do you want a narrow headphone? Do you want something like the 600s, or the 800s a good benchmark for soundstage? There's a ton of very controversial aspects. Almost every aspect of the sound here is very controversial for this entire headphone. So like in all my reviews, I'm gonna be very blunt about what I think about this headphone, and the good parts and the bad parts and the limitations of things and some of the bad aspects of things. Okay, so we're gonna talk about build quality first. So this headphone, and actually most Sennheisers, are really unimpressive when you feel them. Like, they're usually made of plastic. Actually, almost all Sennheisers are made of plastic, especially like the HD line. This one's no different. The entire structure here is plastic except for a few key parts like this. And overall, when you pick it up, it's super lightweight. It's not the most solid feeling headphone in the world. Like a 1990 feels like a tank compared to this. LCDs feel like tanks compared to this. But what's really impressive to me about Sennheiser is their ability to last. This pair, the owner has actually owned these for I think about 7 to 8 years. And there's a few wear and tear signs, and that's to be expected through regular use. But the fact that this headphone has lasted as long as it has and is in this good a condition with regular use is still very impressive. So for that, I have to give a lot of credit to Sennheiser for being able to do that for not just this headphone, and the 600 I know for a fact lasts for years. Okay, so some key parts that I actually like about the build. The headband structure and how it kind of closes in, and you can kind of take it from the middle and kind of just work it to the correct size. And the headband is super lightweight, super comfortable. I do like the material that they chose to use. I actually really like the position of the cable inputs at like the back rear, but they're kind of higher up so they don't hit your shoulders, even if you have aftermarket cables that are perhaps a little bit longer and a little bit stiffer. The comfort on this particular headphone, because like the pads are so big, I think a lot of people are gonna have a lot of issues with the comfort for this headphone. For me, it's perfectly comfortable for about 2 hours. And then it's just pure uncomfortability after that. I can't listen to them for longer. They're fine, and then all of a sudden they're just bad, and I'm like, I can't do it. So they're 300 ohm headphones, and they have a sound pressure level of about 102 decibels. So you can power them off of most amplifiers. The thing about these though is that they are very, very amp picky, like really, really amp picky. I actually recommend a little bit of a kind of a softer or a little bit of a slower amp. Tube amps will probably do well on this depending on the tubes that you got. And I like this on the NFB1 amp. I didn't really like it very much on the THX because the THX is a very, it's very quick, it's very snappy, and that combination didn't do super well with me. Although the resolution was great, it was just a little bit too bright for my tastes. And then the Jotunheim was not a good thing for this. So your results for amp pairing it's gonna be kind of some trial and error. Some amps are going to be great on this, some amps are not going to be very good at all. Let's go ahead and jump into the sound. Overall, I think I would describe the sound as being a little bit stark, a little bit sterile. Occasionally it can be definitely too bright. For me personally, there are a couple frequencies in the treble areas that are they're just a little too strong for me and my ears. But a big important part of how this headphone sounds is actually the imaging and the soundstage. This is one of the widest headphones out there. Probably not the widest, but it's definitely a very wide sounding headphone. So for show and tell, I brought a little artwork for the class to see. All right, disregard the 5-year-old drawing. This is kind of a head, top down, right? The red is the HD800 and the blue, or maybe even black on that, I'm not sure, is the DT1990, just for an example headphone that I'm very familiar with. Okay, so you'll notice that we're working with a couple different shapes and a couple different dots and rings here. Why? So the inner dots represent how close the headphone can sound. And basically that's part of soundstage as well. A big part of imaging is how finite those points can be within the given soundstage. But there's two sides to soundstage. There's total width and total closeness. So a headphone like an HD600, not very wide in terms of the width, but in terms of the intimacy, it's very, very close. So here's the thing about the HD800 soundstage. Well, you can see this outside ring, well, very circular, and I drew this to be kind of the shape of how I imagined the soundstage appearing, a little bit wider on the sides than it is in front and at 45 degrees. A little bit opposite of what the 1990 is like, where the 1990 at 45 degrees is actually a little weak, but on the sides and directly in front of you, it's actually very far out. So the shape of this is a little bit different. Obviously, this isn't accurate. It's the internet, so I have to kind of disclose that. It's wider, so it's larger out than the 1990s are. However, you also notice that this inner circle is bigger than this little dot in the very, very center. And the reason why is because the 1990s have a greater capability of being intimate, but they can also go fairly wide in terms of the width of the soundstage and how far out things can sound. Whereas the HD800 never really can do that. And the outside of this red dot here is about as close as they can ever really sound. They never really sound like they're super focused, right? You're gonna get a soundstage and imaging that's more of an in the room feeling than you're in the microphone feeling. And it's kind of stuck there. Whereas the 1990 I feel like is a good mix of both. It kind of can give you that really close kind of in the microphone feeling, but it can also, depending on the recording and how the recording sounds, it can also feel very kind of in the room, or at least within the degree of realism we're talking about for headphones. Okay, show and tell is over. So hope that helped describe a little bit of the soundstage. Super, super wide. Super accurate as far as headphones go for soundstage and imaging, but it can't ever get intimate, which is, I personally like the soundstage capability of the 1990 more, but I can definitely appreciate and respect what the HD800 is trying to do. There's no right or wrong here, there's just personal preference. I have mine, you have yours, maybe they align, maybe they don't. Either way is okay. Okay, so treble, it's, okay, this has been a hotly contested issue. I think that the treble overall is very resolving, but there are a couple areas within the treble regions that are actually sibilant. Not just bright, not just highly dynamic, but actually sibilant. Specifically, the S range. It's brutal on this headphone for me. It irks me every time I hear a vocalist make an S, especially females. They tend to be particularly bad at this. Males are still affected, but less so. This is in comparison to headphones that have pretty forward treble performance as well, being the Utopia, the Alex, and the DT1990. This is more intense than all of those by quite a big margin, and unfortunately that was a reoccurring issue. This can be somewhat corrected by EQ and modifications, but I have to review this headphone as it is here. So in stock formation, without any mods or EQ, it's a no-go on the treble from me. Okay, so mid-range. Well, mid-range instruments are actually fantastic. I mean, tonally, the timbre of all of them is just beautifully and gorgeously represented. Guitars, cellos, violins, drums, all have just this substantially awesome texture and tone to them. It's definitely a Sennheiser-y sounding mid-range without the forwardness, and a lot of these, the treble, the mid-range, and the bass, It all falls in line with that very, very wide sound. So unlike an HD6XX, for example, where you have like kind of the instruments in the background, the vocalist is very much stepped forward, very, very close to you. That's not what this headphone is providing to you. So you have to be very aware of what you're getting and how the sound is actually delivered to you. And this kind of falls into the vocal ranges. So the vocal range, you have to be very aware, again, of how the delivery is happening. You have to be okay with that in the room sound versus that in the microphone sound. So if you really like that intimate sound kind of delivery for vocals to where they feel very close, very in your face, that's not what this headphone is going to get you. But tonally, all the vocal ranges are amazing. The position, the accuracy, and the texture of the vocalist is really, really good. The problem is those sibilant S's. The sibilance actually kind of reminds me of like 9500s in a certain way, like SHP 9500s. Obviously two completely different sounding headphones, but that headphone had a big issue with the sibilance of the S's, and so does this headphone. So bass response. First we're going to talk about mid bass between about 100 hertz to about 300 hertz. Excellent representation here, just great. You got a nice level of saturation. It's not overly saturated, but it's nicely like filled out there. Male vocals have like a really good kind of depth to them. I do really like the male vocals here. Then sub bass is kind of the thing that I don't really like here. So the sub bass below 100 hertz kind of starts to go in terms of how prominent it is, how forward it is, and even on a frequency response graph, that'll kind of back me up as to what I'm hearing. But it starts to kind of slope down as you get lower and lower and lower. And it's pretty much gone after about 50 hertz. And everything below that, yes, you can hear it if you're really trying, and that's like the only thing playing, is just like a 30 hertz tone, you could definitely hear it. But it's not really to the level to where I would consider it to be enjoyable. And there's songs like Arlington from the Wailing Jennies, Interlude by Yoshi Hirakawa, Evil Dub by Trent Mahler, Hold Up by Beyonce, the entire Blade Runner 2049 soundtrack. There's just so much missing in those songs because that sub bass is not there to fill out the song. And it's just something that I know should be there. I know how it should sound, and it just doesn't, and it leaves a lot to be desired. Now normally here I would skip to the conclusion. I've covered imaging, soundstage, treble, mid-range, bass response, basically all my bases. But there's one thing that this headphone is the best at of anything that I've tried, and I wholeheartedly mean this: gaming. Some of you are probably like, gaming on a $1,000 headphone? Really, Josh? Come on. Yes, this is hands down the best gaming headphone I've tried to date in terms of being a competitive gaming headphone. If I had like a gun to my head and I had to pick like the best peripherals to win a match and my life depended on it, this is the headphone that I would practice and play on. And for whatever reason, just the mix of the frequency response and the soundstage and the positional accuracy within that soundstage, it's just the best. Like really just the best. I game on every single headphone to try it out. Some I mentioned it in reviews when it really stands out as good, and others I don't. This is one of those reviews where the performance is simply just incredible, and it's really the it is the end game headphone. And somebody's in the background saying, what about stacks? Well, here's the problem with stacks. For realism in a game, they sound the most realistic in terms of the soundstage and the imaging. But for whatever reason, they are not as playable as the HD 800s. It's a 10 out of 10 headphone. It's like the end game gaming headphone. The end gaming headphone. All right, so the conclusion. What I recommend for this headphone, because I know there's a lot of people out there, if you can try it before you buy it, I highly recommend it. You may still really enjoy the sound. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean that it's not a good headphone. It's just not good for me. As a general rule for headphones, I recommend try before you buy pretty much always. With this specific headphone, I'm going to list trying before you buy as a requirement. Obviously, like I can't enforce that requirement, but if I was gonna list something as like not recommended, required, this would be on the required side for try before you buy. You may like it, that's great. And I do not mean this to be funny or offensive to anybody who genuinely likes this headphone, but if you have any form of hearing loss where you're trying to make up for those top end frequencies, this is a good consideration for you because it really bumps up those top end frequencies and makes them a lot more apparent than what I would like, but I don't have any loss of hearing in those top end frequencies yet. So if you have that, it might be a good option. And to close, I have a very confusing statement about this headphone. The HJ800 is a headphone that makes music sound like the headphone rather than the headphone sound like the music. Don't know if that makes any sense to anybody but me, but that's just kind of what I've been thinking about ever since I started scripting this review. So there it is, the review finally of the HJ800 Sennheiser headphone. All right guys, thank you very much for watching. I'm gonna hop out of here. Check the links in the description down below for all the headphones mentioned in this video, as well as my Patreon. And before you go, I have a quick message about it. If my videos have helped you in any way, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It really does help the channel a lot. You will receive early access to videos like this one and an exclusive Patreon only behind the scenes video monthly. Patreon also helps with shipping costs and feeding my coffee addiction so that I can get up at 6 a.m. to make videos like this one.